Law of sines, as I mentioned, this will work for any triangle. Doesn't have to be a right triangle, but if it works for any triangle, will it still work for a right triangle? Yeah, it will. All you need, and actually I'll be honest with you, a lot of people kind of forget about SOHCAHTOA after this and they just do it this way because it doesn't matter. It's called law of sines though, and so you can use it whenever you want. And what I say is law of sines is going to work in any triangle as long as you have what I call a pair. And a pair is you have the angle and the side opposite that angle. If you have a pair, and then really you need one more bit of information, and law of sines will work. Okay. What I mean, for example, you see like right here I have angle A, and you notice how I have side A across from it. That's the pattern we're going to follow here. Here's angle C, and you see side C is across from that. Angle B and side B is across from that. That's the setup you need to use if you are going to use law of sines, which is technically that right there. All it is a proportion. Do you remember when we had 3 proportions on some of the ones in Chapter 7? You got to kind of pick and choose whichever 2 you wanted to use, right? So whichever 2 you actually fill in the most would be the 2 you want to use. And in fact, I don't think many of you are ever actually going to write all 3. You're going to write the 2 you need because you're going to see which 2 you're going to be using, and those are the only 2 you're going to write. Okay? And then all you have to do is basically cross multiply, divide, and you've got it. Okay? And so why don't we take a look at one? And first determine if we have a pair. Well, there's no picture. Well, we better draw. So we've got a triangle. I see a 101 degree angle, so you might want to try and draw something somewhat obtuse. So you can put a 101 degree angle in it. And it says that's angle B. Angle A, and you can put angle A wherever you want. I'll put it up there, is 38 degrees. And then once you get that, I'm going to ask you where you think I should write side A being 15. Can I put that any side I want, or is there a very particular side I have to put that based on the way that the setup was earlier? Can I just put 15 wherever I want? Should I put 15 right here, you think? Why not there? Well, that's not side A. If we call it this would actually be, if that's C, this is side C over here. Should I put it there? No, because that's really side B. So because side A is going to be opposite angle A, and so we will put the 15 there. So then the question is, I would always like to start with you, well, it's not a right triangle, so we can't use Pythagorean theorem, we can't use SOHCAHTOA, but we can use law of sines because we have a pair and one more bit of information. The pair I'm referring to is 38 degrees and 15. That's what I mean when I say a pair. The other bit of information I have is 101 degrees. Let's face it, if I asked you for angle C in this one, that's not overly difficult. We were doing that earlier this year, it's just out of 180. Here, all I'm asking you to do is determine side B, which is over there. So I normally start off my law of sines by using my pair. So sine, now remember, you're always going to do it of an angle. So let's use 38 degrees over, you put it over its side that it's paired up with. Which side is 38 degrees paired up with? It's paired up with 15, right? Equals, well, if B is what I want, B is going to be on the bottom, because that's a side. The sides go on the bottom, the angles go on the top, at least in our setup, that's how we do it. And so what should go on top of that fraction to help me solve? Sine of 101, because those are the 2 paired together. Sine of 101 and B are paired together. Well, how many variables are in this proportion that we have? 1. Is that something then we can solve for? Most definitely. And again, I kind of normally will start you a little slower doing just this way. I take that times that. Now, am I going to take 15 times the angle of 101? Is that what you're supposed to do? No, I'm not trying to make the angle 15 times bigger. So it'd be 15 sine of 101. Is that something my calculator can take care of? Can my calculator do that? Yes, it can. Equals, again, I'm doing it kind of the slower way, B times the sine of 38 degrees. So now the question is, I like to kind of get the algebra all set up and then type it into my calculator. That's kind of how I am. Because let's face it, if it's going to do all the work, let's let it do all the work. Well, is my variable by itself? No, B is not by itself because it has sine of 38 attached to it. So how do I get the sine of 38, right? That's a decimal my calculator is going to take care of for me, right? How's it attached to B? By multiplication, so what are we going to do? Yeah, divide by it. Is that fine? Yeah. Because then divide by sine of 38. Do you agree if right now I typed in sine of 38 and 2 minutes from now I type in sine of 38, I'm going to get the same answer? So what do these two sines of 38s do to each other? They cancel, because it doesn't matter when I type that in, I'm going to get the same number. But if you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other. Is the variable by itself now? Okay, and what I'm going to do right now is show you how to type that into a calculator so that you don't get in trouble. Okay, because there is one little parenthesis that if you miss it, you are going to get a wrong answer and possibly an error. Okay, so I'm going to write that over here on the board so I don't forget it, and then I'll go to the calculator, and if you don't have one, you might want to run and grab one. And of course, what mode should you be in? Degrees, most definitely. So you might want to check that. So I'm going to check that before I go too far. Mode. Oh, I'm in degrees. All right. Because otherwise I would get a really wrong answer. So here we go. 15. Now what automatically happens when you hit sign on these calculators? That you can see your display. It gives you that parenthesis, right? And what do I want to take sign of? Well, 101, right? So 101. Now yesterday somebody asked me, do you have to close off that last parenthesis? I think it was in here actually that somebody asked me that. And I said, well, yesterday I said, well, not really, because we weren't doing anything else, right? Am I trying on top just to take the sign of 101? Is that all I want to take the sign of on top? Yeah, on top, that's all I want to take the sign of, so close it off. And then divide by sign of 38. Now, technically, right now, that last parenthesis, I could probably leave it off, but I want you to get in that habit of typing it in so that, like I said yesterday, when you get to the harder ones like this one where there's more stuff, you don't forget to put the parenthesis in. Okay? And when I hit enter, this will tell me side B. Do we expect this to be bigger than the other 15 or smaller? Why bigger? It's a bigger angle, right? It better be bigger. Or perhaps you already hit enter and that's why you know it's bigger. And on my calculator it says 23.916, so forth and so on. And where do I say to round? To the nearest tenth, so we would round this to 23.9. Okay? So let's go back and write that in. 23.9. Have I answered the question for this problem? It said to find the value. It says determine B. I have. Could we very easily go and get angle C like I said? Yeah. And then we could use law of sines again to get side C if we had to, but in this particular problem, I didn't ask you to. That's law of sines. It's pretty nice. I see I could switch up the things I give you though, but you need to have a pair. And when I say that, I hope you know what I mean now when I say a pair. Okay. So then the first question is, do we have a pair? Now what's different about this one though? It doesn't ask me for just one thing. It says to solve a triangle. What does it mean to solve a triangle? Yeah, find everything missing. If anything is missing, an angle or a side, get them. All right? And so let's face it, I think angle X is probably the easiest thing to calculate first here. Does it have to be the first thing you do? No. But why not do it? That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Angle X is how much? How much is left over here? 53? All right. 53 degrees is left over. I'll agree with that because the total has to be 180. Well, there's my pair, right? 88 degrees and 70. So here we go. Side of 88 over what? 70, yep. Does it matter? Well, not really. It doesn't matter which one you go for next, but I'll give you a small hint that may save you the further you go in math. If you have a choice, go for the smallest angle next, okay, or use the smallest angle next. It just might save you. There's some weird things that can happen out there. So I would say go for the smallest angle or use the smallest angle next. So then we are going to put sine of, if you follow that rule, sine of 39 in there over z. Again, that's if you have the choice. Are you always going to have a choice? No. Okay. But that's if you have the choice, please go for the smallest or use the smallest one next. Any questions how I set up that particular law of sines right there? No? Okay. Well, then we would take 70 times that, right? Sine of 39. Maybe I'll put the parentheses in there so you can see it. And that would equal z times the sine of 88 times. Well, this is a very similar setup to what we just had on the last one. We have to get the variable by itself. Right now it's not, but it is multiplied by the sine of 88. So, as we were told on the last problem, let's go ahead and divide by that, because these two are going to cancel. It doesn't matter when I type that in. I could type that in tomorrow and it's going to be the same thing, as long as I'm in degrees. And so there's what you need to type in. And did I say to round? Yep, nearest tenth, so we'll put a little approximation there. Why don't you go ahead and try that on your calculator, and we'll see if you get the same thing. Okay, that's how I would type it in. Again, being very careful with this parenthesis after the 39 there. I almost typed it in wrong. Those of you that were watching, I almost typed 38, and then we would have had the wrong answer. Would have been very close, but would have been wrong. And hopefully you got more than 70, less than 70. What do you think? I said, why? Because the angle's smaller, right? Oh, 44, and now if you had to round this one, it'd be 44.1. Yep. And so go back and put approximately 44.1. So you go over here to Z to do 44.1. Now to get X, Pythagorean theorem? Is that a good idea? It is not a good idea because this is not a right triangle. Pythagorean theorem and SOHCAHTOA only work in a right triangle, which means X, oh, well, basically for X, and does everybody have this written down so that I can erase? Okay. We're basically going to go right back here and set up law of sines again. But we're not going to use 39 degrees in Z this time. We're going to use 53 degrees in X. And so 70 sine of 53 equals X times the sine of 88. Now this is pretty much the same math. Would we expect this to be bigger than 44.1 or smaller? Bigger, and bigger or smaller than 70? Yeah, it's going to be right in between because the angle is in between. Any questions how I got that set up? All right, I'm going to cheat a little bit based on what these calculators can do. I'm just going to go up and change the number if it stops anytime soon. 53. Everybody ready? You told me it'd be between the two, huh? So between 44.1 and 70. Well, then this is a believable answer. And if we had to round that one, it'd be 55.9. Okay. And I know it's kind of lost on you how amazing this is that this can find this information for you. Let's face it, it's really not that hard. It does it quite simply for you. So, have we solved this triangle then? Have we found all missing measurements? Yep, that's good. Okay. Why don't you try setting up the next one? I think we're going to run out of time here.